welcome to this month's episode of Fintech Firebrand. I'm Virginie O'Shea, founder of Firebrand Research, and I'm here to chat to you about September's Fintech and finreg news. Now, I guess the biggest news this month so far, aside from it being a very busy conference month, is in the EU, we've received Mario Draghi's 400-plus page report on European or EU level competitiveness. Now, we've read through that report. There's a lot of different details in it. There's a big focus within the report on three basic pillars, one being innovation, the second being decarbonisation of the economy, and also decarbonisation of all industries, and the third one being EU security and defence, particularly in light of geopolitical developments such as the continuing Russia-Ukraine war. So certainly there are very big themes there, but a lot of the underlying stuff in it does relate to the EU level Capital Markets Union, with a view to helping fund or invest in the EU and helping to fund a lot of these different programs of work related to innovation or improving EU's positioning within technology innovation, and also in creating a decarbonised economy. So certainly these are very big topics, but some interesting and very common themes that we've seen over the last couple of decades, recalling the Giovannini Group report from 2001. I think I've referenced that a million times over the last 20 years, but certainly that is one area where we've seen 15 barriers to efficient capital markets across post-trade barriers that we've seen that still remain, including tax or inconsistent taxation across the EU, the various countries, the member states, each having their own approach to taxation. We've also seen a lot of references to the complex clearing and settlement environment as well. So some of the proposals within the Draghi report are about simplifying some of that stuff in terms of market infrastructure. There's also a big push within it to reduce bureaucracy that may be holding back firms for setting up and focusing on fintech innovation in the EU landscape. So certainly there's a lot of focus on trying to simplify regulation, including maybe establishing a new supervisor for regulatory simplification at the EU level. Likewise, there is discussion in there, and this is something I probably referenced earlier in the year because we've heard it from some of the other executives at the EU level, about having more powers at the EU level for regulators. So rather than having a supervisor like ESMA that sort of works in cooperation with the different member states, national competent authorities, the concept would be a sort of Securities and Exchange Commission-like body that sits at the top of the EU and that polices the markets directly rather than via national competent authorities. Now, ESMA does already have some of those powers, which is interesting, but it doesn't have as much power as is being suggested by the Draghi report and others. So whether this is something of a political hot potato, I expect so, given that EU individual member states may not be so keen on having authority taken away from them, but certainly an interesting common theme that's been running throughout this year, and where it goes, who knows, but certainly there will be much more discussion about that topic. Now, when it comes to the Giovannini barriers, as I mentioned, there's been discussion about the need for more consolidation within central securities depositories, for example, and clearinghouses across the EU. Draghi suggests that it would be much better for the state of the economy and for efficiency and the reduction of friction to have one CSD that covers the whole of the EU and one CCP. Now, how realistic is that? That's another thing entirely. Certainly that would involve a lot of consolidation. A lot of mergers would have to happen before that would be the outcome, and that could take quite a lot of time. There's also this discussion about sort of competition versus monopolies. So there's certainly going to be some debate on that topic. Obviously, there is efficiency to have scale, but there's also possibly some competitive downsides to that. Likewise, there may also be some concentration risks too. So a lot of things to think about from the Draghi report. It's gone to the EU powers that be to discuss. There's been some discussion already, but certainly expect much more discussion or vigorous discussion over the coming months as EU commissioners get appointed under the new auspices of the new MEP group, and then the remaining European Commission head. So we'll see what happens next. In the UK, we've also seen something of a state of execution for firms that are preparing for the UK's fund naming rules under its ESG regime. The UK FCA recognises, the Financial Conduct Authority recognises that firms may be struggling to comply within the frame of the deadline. So it's extended the deadline, having a softer deadline and extending the hard deadline to April of next year. So firms are they have to show that they're making progress towards meeting the goals of the fund naming rules when it comes to marketing sustainability funds in the UK. So we'll see how much progress is made by the industry and whether any more extensions are granted by the FCA in the coming months. It also has been somewhat of a bonanza month in the US for finreg enforcement actions. Both the SEC and the CFTC have been exceedingly busy this month, announcing various fines and actions they have taken against different financial institutions and also issuers in the country, in the US, and various kinds, including, crypto scams, lots of different actions. There was a lot of discussion last month about approved communication methods, the WhatsApp fines that I've referenced before. There were more fines of that nature this month as well, this time for ratings organizations. So the SEC went after six nationally recognized statistical ratings organizations because of their failure to maintain and preserve electronic communications. Not very easy to say sometimes. But there's been a lot of activity on that front. So certainly expect much more going into the next couple of months. They're always very busy towards the end of the year when it comes to finreg enforcement actions. So keep your eye on this space. In Asia, very interesting development. The Monetary Authority of Singapore has announced it's launched a new project looking at quantum cryptographics. Now, MAS is often very far ahead of the rest of the regulatory organizations around the world when it comes to fintech. Certainly, they've done a lot of direct funding as well, which is very interesting. And they do have a funding stream within the quantum computing space. So that's something to bear in mind as well. But this particular project has been launched with several banks and several technology companies that are specializing in this space to understand the impacts that quantum computing could have on computer security going forward. Now, quantum computing obviously is an area that is highly volatile at the moment. It's a very experimental area of technology development using quantum mechanics, and it's certainly something that is all the rage in terms of discussion within the technology community, and its potential impact on how we secure our data across the industry is certainly something we need to think about when quantum takes off. The predictions for when quantum might take off is between 5 and 30 years, so very big range there in terms of fully commercialized options on the market. But there is certainly a lot of activity going on in that space. And you would imagine that MAS knows something if they're setting up something quite as organized as this particular pilot. So it'll be interesting to see the recommendations they come up with regards to quantum key distribution and how that relates to the security of the industry going forward. So certainly watch this space on that front. And now my final thoughts for the month. I mentioned that it's a very busy month with regards to conferences. Its conference season is well and truly kicked off. Earlier this month, Firebrand was out in Stockholm for Post-Trade 360, which is a very large conference that brings together a lot of the Nordic and EU level market participants to discuss everything post-trade. Now, some of the key themes during the conference were unsurprisingly related to the competitive nature of the EU markets and how to improve the economic growth of the region as a whole, including the Nordics, obviously, on a more regional focus. There was a lot of discussion, again, about consistent harmonization and standardization of the markets in the post-trade space. There was hot discussions, as Joran Fors always says, of the Ts. So we had discussion of T+1, shortening of the settlement cycle in the EU. We had hot discussion about Sweden's move to join Target 2 securities, albeit in about in a few years' time. It could be 2030, 2040. We're not sure when that's going to happen. And there was a lot of discussion about talent, the other T that we often talk about. So how to attract more talent into the industry and how to retain it. So certainly very common themes we've been hearing across all of the different industry forums this year. I expect some of the upcoming events that we'll be at, such as InvestOps later this month, will take a buy-side view on some of those topics, maybe not so much on T2S, but certainly T+1 is expected, and talent will certainly be a topic there. But we look forward to seeing you at an event in London or elsewhere soon.